Welcome to the RealPropPro podcast, where strategy, innovation, and wealth converge to redefine real estate investing. Whether you're brand new or a seasoned pro, we're here to help you build, scale, and automate your real estate business like never before. From mastering the investor mindset to game-changing strategies like tax deed, tax lien investing, wholesaling, fix and flips, multifamily investing, plus so much more. Each week, we bring you insider secrets, expert guests, and real-world case studies to give you the knowledge and confidence to take action. So, if you're ready to think bigger, invest smarter, and create lasting wealth, you're in the right place.
Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the RPP podcast. I'm your host, Ian Dietler. I'm a real estate investor and business owner here in Sacramento, California. My journey in real estate investing started back in 2014. Since then, I've been involved in real estate investing, networking, and project management. Beyond just doing deals, my passion is helping everyday people break free from the 9-to-5 grind and build wealth through real estate investing. Over the years, I've seen so many people want to get into real estate investing but feel stuck. Some people don't know where to start. Others are afraid of making mistakes or feeling like they don't have enough money. That's exactly why we launched the podcast, to break down those barriers and give you real, actionable advice from experienced investors, lenders, and entrepreneurs. All of our guests have been where you are today and worked hard to break through. Now, let me explain what RPP is and why it matters to you. RPP stands for RealPropPro. It is an education and training platform that also has online software with nationwide property and property owner data. This can be used to find deals, run comps, find buyers, and so much more. It is built specifically to help everyday people invest in real estate through various strategies. RPP shows students how to invest in tax deed, tax liens, wholesaling, fix and flips, and various other methods. Our goal is to help brand new investors, and we want to help people take action and build their portfolios. We do this through in-person events, online training, mentorship programs, and one-on-one coaching. Whether you're looking to buy your first property, automate your investing, scale your full-time real estate business, or implement new strategies, RPP gives you the tools and resources to make it happen. That brings us to today's episode. No matter how much real estate knowledge you have, the right mindset is so important. Another vital part of real estate investing is borrowing money. That's why I wanted to kick off this podcast series with an expert in that space. Someone who has tons of experience working with investors, finding deals, and help his clients build wealth. Our guest today is none other than Matt Gougé, also known as Matt the Mortgage Guy. Matt is one of the top mortgage brokers in Sacramento, specializing in working with real estate investors. He has not only helped people finance deals, he's also an investor himself. He understands both sides of the equation. Matt, welcome to the show.
Ian, man, I feel honored to be the first guest on the podcast. And as you were talking, being a real estate investor since 2014, that's when my journey started in mortgage in 2014. February 1st, to be exact, is when I got licensed. So I think, we've been running around looking for fellow investors, looking for, motivation and people to learn from for the same amount of time in Sacramento. And that's, certainly where I met you, right? Is it another one of these real estate meetups? You and I have both been to a ton. I know you have because I've seen you at them. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about my own investing journey. And then obviously through the eyes of investors, I've helped thousands of people finance mortgages all across the country. So it's cool for me to be able to not just share my personal experience of what I've done, but I've got to see investors, stuff that works, stuff that doesn't work, the traits that help investors win. And I'm happy to share that because I know that first call I have with somebody who's brand new, between that person who I meet on the phone and what can become of it 3, 5, 10 years later is sometimes magic. I've got a really cool story to share about an investor I started working with back in 2014, and the journey that he's taken. People will be, hopefully inspired by it. But yeah, just excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Wow, thank you so much. So the first question is, what got you into real estate?
So this is a common story, and I think people are going to relate to this because I'm going to be honest about it. Got into mortgage in 2014, and I got into mortgage. Somebody just told me, Matt, you're a math nerd. You're good with people. You've got some entrepreneurial type skills. You'd be good at mortgage. And to be honest, like that, it is my wheelhouse. I like math. I like people. I'm entrepreneurial, and being a mortgage broker is a little bit sales, a little bit marketing, some math, and analytical stuff as well. And so when I got into mortgage in 2014, I couldn't help but be around real estate. I couldn't help but be exposed to all this stuff. So that's when I really started listening to the bigger pockets. I started popping into real estate events. And I think originally it honestly might have been, I was looking for clients, and seeing all my clients win and seeing the magic of real estate through their eyes, the guy buying his, fourth investment property, or helping somebody buy a quadplex where they're going to live in one unit and rent the others. I really got the itch of, oh my gosh, I need to do something personally. And a quick rewind, I bought my first house in 2006, which was well before I got into mortgage. Actually house hacked. My wife was just my girlfriend at the time, and bought a house and got engaged 06 and 07. She had a friend who rented a room, and I had a friend who rented a room. So we were house hacking long before I knew or thought about that term, because that $2,800 mortgage in 2006 seemed huge. But when you had two people each paying $500 towards it, made it a little bit more reasonable. But what I want to say about my start is that, like most people, I listened to so many real estate podcasts. Bigger Pockets was popular, and not as much YouTube, but literally like forums online. And I was going to these real estate meetups. I was talking to people about real estate. It took years before I took any action. And, when I tell people like they've got to take action and take the first step and do the first deal, I'm doing it, and I'm telling them that from experience. I, like them, took many more years than I should have, because I think it was 2017 when I bought my first investment properties. So 3 years isn't a ton of time. I honestly, Ian, know so many people, and you probably have met these same people at real estate meetups where you're like, man, like I've seen this guy's face for 8 or 10 years, or, she's been going to real estate meetups, and then you talk to them, they're still working on deal number one. And I think a podcast like this and what you guys are doing to help investors and to show them some tools and show them what other people are doing is vitally important, because what I know with absolute certainty is you have to start. And there's a cool little quote that I heard that I really like, that you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And so, if you want to be great at anything, like, you're not going to just wake up one day and be great. You're not going to study your way into greatness. Like, you have to take action. But that first action could be imperfect. So go out and buy a bum deal. And quick story on my personal thing, shout out to my wife, who always knows better. She told me not to invest in Alabama. And being a math guy and thinking I know, more than I do, I was like, listen, I can buy this house in Montgomery, Alabama for $70,000. Down payment of 20% is super affordable and not a huge risk. And they've got low property taxes. I remember the number, dude. It was $356 principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And The problem with that is if you try to pencil it and you say $14,000 down, I'm going to cash flow over $300 a month, and you start to look at like 25% returns. Well, that part of Montgomery, Alabama wasn't a really sweet place to live. Gunshots and violence, and people didn't want to live there. And so, long story short, it was a terrible investment, but it was an investment. It was a learning lesson. If you're going to spend money on education in sometimes can be a deal. So, 2017 was that first deal. A couple of years later, made the best of investments I've made, which was a couple fourplexes. But I don't think I get to the fourplexes and the other single families and the stuff that's working without a swing and a miss. Thankfully for me, it wasn't a terrible miss. I think when I sold in 2020, I ended up probably cutting a check for $7,000 or $8,000. I had a few years of lost sleep and negative cash flow, but it didn't break me. What it did was teach me a few things. If I ever invest out of state, I not only, can watch an online video or talk to somebody and get lessons from it, I got personal lessons about that. And so what I want people to take away, I've seen example after example of this, is like you have to take action. Get around people that are going to inspire you to take a first step. It doesn't have to be a huge deal. It doesn't have to be, something that you just wake up and buy something day one. But, 3, 6, 12 months of educating yourself, a year of talking to people, eventually you want to get out there and start swinging the bat. Or else, you're going to be like some of these people, unfortunately, that I know that have been talking about investing in real estate for a decade and haven't done so yet.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. We all know people like that. Similar to you, I also had that same kind of experience to where I spent a couple years also just learning. I spent a couple years also just learning and analyzing deals and not taking action. And it wasn't until 2019 that I finally did take action and purchase, my first fix and flip project. So, great to hear that. I love that our, stories and timelines, align so well, as from when we started to when, we actually got into it. Obviously you've been doing really well in the, mortgage lending business. Can you talk a little bit about that side and how and kind of what services you provide for both residential home buyers and also what kind of like programs and stuff you have for investor buyers?
Yeah, and so 2014 was when I got started. Worked for a small retail mortgage outfit until 2018, and then since 2018 I've been a mortgage broker. It just means I can go out there and shop different wholesale lenders and have a wide array of products. I think the number now is like 400 or 450 million in funded loans. So I've closed over 1,000 loans. I don't say that to brag. I say that to say a normal person with a lot of at bats and a lot of swings is going to get good at something. So I think that, my experience and my quote unquote expertise doesn't come from me being a PhD or some, smart guy. I've just done it a lot. And over those years, I've done first time home buyers. I've done move up buyers. Investors have always held a special spot in my heart, I guess, because I see the magic of real estate investing, and I can take lessons and things I learned from one investor and help the next investor. And so from non-QM loans to literally anything you can think about on 1 to 4 unit properties is stuff that we do. I've got plenty of contacts, and if somebody tells me I want to buy a 10 unit apartment complex or want to buy an office building, like, I've got contacts for that. But like as a residential mortgage broker, my stuff is 1 to 4 unit, but you'd be surprised at how much wealth somebody can build, buying 1 to 4 units. Over these years, I've, had a mix of all kinds of different buyers. Investors probably make up 35 or 40% of the business I'm doing. And now as of 2021, since I joined U Mortgage, we're nationwide. So I'm doing it in 48 states, which is really cool to me. I get to see like, hey, what's going on in Florida? What are these people doing in Tennessee or Texas or Arizona? And, I ask people because I'm curious and I'm constantly learning as well. Oh, that's cool. Like you're doing co-living in Arizona. Tell me how that works, and I've got a client who's an IT professional making multi six figures a year with a W-2. And after acquiring 5 properties, which isn't huge, right? Like that's things that people need to remember. Like you can change your life with a handful of investments. We're not talking about like 8,000 doors and you want to be, Brandon Turner from Bigger Pockets. We're talking about like five single family homes. That's what this investor client of mine has. I think last I talked, his like bottom line net after expenses is $22,000 a month. And so he's in this glorious position where he's like, I'm not doing the IT stuff anymore. If in a few years I can create a business that's generating $22,000 a month without me punching a clock and being, held to a schedule that's dictated by a company, all I have to do is repeat that, and I go from 22 to 44,000. Probably get better at it. Probably optimize that. But he's just doing co-living. He's actually providing great service in a niche that I believe in real estate is one that there's really a need for, right? Affordable housing. And so, if you charge somebody $275 a week or $225 a week to have, their own bedroom and their own space and their own parking spot and whatnot inside of a 5, 6, 7 bedroom house, like that's great. And so, I don't even know where this question started because there's so many different ways that we can go. But, I'm doing neat stuff like that all over the country. I've got guys that are building ground up construction in Kentucky. I've got others that are doing other type of stuff and they're buying a fourplex that they're going to live in Florida. And, at 22 years old, that's one thing that hopefully your podcast reaches some of that younger demographic. When I talk to somebody about buying a multi-unit property as their first investment in their 20s, like there is some true magic that happens there because real estate is really a game of time. And the longer you can be in the investment, the better. There's no stock market investor that tells you like, hey, I hit a home run. All the Warren Buffett and those guys talk about, what compound interest does over time. Like real estate's no different. You buy it, you hold on to it. Sometimes you exchange it. Sometimes you optimize it. But the true wealth comes from somebody who's like, yeah, I was in this game for 30 years. I started out buying single family. I saw an opportunity where I picked up an 11 unit complex. I sold that in 1031 and I found a space that worked in my local market around, retail, whatever it is. Over decades, you've got normal people who create massive amounts of wealth. And, I don't know about you, but I would think that the listener and myself, like, I don't want to save my way to $5 million a $5 bill at a time, right? Like I want stuff going on in the background where you're like, oh my gosh, like this real estate I've owned in California has appreciated 5.9% per year. And, that's hundreds of thousands or, 7 figures in a lot of people's cases over a few decade horizon. That's the neat stuff, man. And we'll dive into that, like numbers stuff. I'd love to talk about, and we'll dive into that stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to keep kind of going on with that right now, actually, because it's so powerful to think about what owning rental real estate can do. So can you take a little bit of time to kind of talk about that? Like, obviously, like you should be having positive cash flow. So, I mean, that's one thing that's a benefit. But you were also just kind of talking about holding it long term. You get the debt pay down, right? So your tenant is actually paying your mortgage and that's dropping how much you owe. and dropping how much you owe plus the appreciation of what the property is worth, just every month you're just increasing the equity in that property. So can you kind of talk a little bit about the benefits of owning rental properties?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I think people do really well with examples, real simple
Absolutely.
examples. Public school guy like me, and of course the mortgage business has been going well. So I've got some great income coming in, but it doesn't take, being a $500,000 a year engineer to be a real estate investor. I work with people that, are making $60, $70, $80,000 a year. They were smart enough to have bought something with 3.5% down FHA and held on to it, and then they bought their next house, and all of a sudden you've got a handful. For California numbers, let's say you get yourself to 4 properties. This is not like something that's so far out of reach in the stars that people can't relate to. So you're an everyday person and you acquire 4 properties. Those 4 properties are worth $2 million. And, maybe you're in Ohio, maybe you're in another part of the country where that number seems high. Great. You can cut it in half or you can do what you want with it. But, $2 million in real estate, which in this case is just 4 properties, depending on the interest rate and depending on other stuff, the debt pay down might be different. But to your point, like there's multiple things going on when you own real estate. There is the appreciation. And people will knock California real estate, the 5.9% number that I used, like that's the average appreciation over the last 39 years in California. And so if you own $2 million in real estate while you sleep, the average, me not trying to be optimistic or paint it, more rosy than it should be, 5.9% of 2 million is $118,000 a year. So $118,000 a year net worth, you're adding $10,000, give or take, to your net worth every single month while you sleep, just owning that real estate. Depending on your interest rate and whatnot, you're probably paying a few $1,000s a month down on the debt. So maybe you owe $1.4 million on that because you've bought some, it appreciated. Then you bought the next one with 10% down and that one's appreciated. But, if you owe 1.4 million, tenants are paying the rent. This isn't your money. And, 1 month you owe 1.4. The next month you owe 1.397, then 1.394, so maybe there's $3,000 a month that's being paid down on the debt. Like that's another $36,000 a year. That's for all intents and purposes happening while you sleep. It's relatively passive. I'm not a CPA, so I'm not going to talk about the exact, tax write-offs, but owning real estate, you're going to have, tax write-offs and certain costs that are associated with it are going to be written off. The interest that you pay, quote unquote, your tenants pay is going to offset the income you get from it. All of this, Ian, and we're not even talking about cash flow. And honestly, when I talk to people who own on the coast or in these more expensive markets like California, my real estate would be a great investment if I had zero cash flow ever. I happen to, cash flow great on the 4plexes I bought, the single families I have. It might only be a few $100s a month, but since I've got such low interest rates on those, I think the debt pay down last I checked, as a math nerd, I love it, dude. Like, I think it was like 1,000 or something last year got paid down on the debt. Like that's really cool to think about, that over the next decade, without a single dollar bill coming out of my pocket, I'm going to owe $500,000 less on this real estate that I own. And last, numbers I checked, it was something like 3.3 million. And so like at 5.9% a year over a decade, that might be like, it's definitely going to be 7 figures in appreciation, right? Like historically, 6%, we'd be talking about, like $180,000 a year. But, conservatively, we could say over a decade, like it's going to be worth $1.5 million more. And I'm going to owe $500,000 less, like $2 million, normal dude, public education, right? Like $2 million in net worth going on there, regardless of what I choose to do, as a mortgage broker or, quote unquote, working. And that's the power of real estate, that like, I'm talking to everyday people. I'm not talking about a guy who's, a multimillionaire who comes from multimillionaires and is putting $500,000 down on a 30-unit apartment complex. I'm talking about a normal dude that bought a fourplex, then bought a single family, then bought another and over time collected some real estate that's going to like be generational wealth that, quite honestly, like, my dad was a truck driver, right? My dad made not a lot of money. My mom was cleaning houses and working in the cafeteria of my elementary school. And so 0 silver spoons in the house, and, not a single penny in wealth handed over. What I'm able to do for my kids, and like with the clients that I'm talking to, the stuff that they're able to do for their families is magical. And what I think people should hear and should be inspired by is, it's everyday people. You can do it. If you're listening to this and you have the ability to work and make money, and you're, open-minded enough to go out there and talk to fellow real estate investors and go, oh, I didn't think about that. That's working in Sacramento. That's a strategy that I think I can get behind. I've got a skill set that might align with acquiring properties that way or buying that type of property. I'm going to try that. Or you meet somebody that says, here's what I'm doing in Phoenix, Arizona. It would work in your market. I know it would. Oh yeah, that person's doing it. That person's doing it. The amount of opportunity that exists in real estate, and it always does. Last year, this year, next year, the year after that, it's always going to be there, right? There's going to be different ways that are better or worse than others, but there's dozens and dozens of ways that any individual can get into it and do it. And so I'm passionate about it because I know it works. I've seen it, and I've seen everyday people do it time and time again. And it's really cool, man. Like, I went and spoke at this church that somebody asked me to speak at, and I felt like I was breathing life into some of these people where home ownership wasn't even on their radar. And I'm like, listen, like, you've got a great day job working for, PG&E. If you bought a duplex and lived in one side and rented out the other at your age, like, that thing will be worth $1 million and it'll be paid off by the time you're 55 at worst, right?
And that's one property.
Yeah, that's one property. And maybe you've moved out by then, which is likely the case. And now each side is renting for $2,500, probably more in the future, because, carton of eggs will probably cost $30 by then. But either way, like, that's either $1 million that gets exchanged into some other type of property, or it's $5,000, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 in income to fund this person's retirement. And so it's neat, and it's not exclusive, to people that are in some club or have a silver spoon or, have been handed down properties or wealth generation to generation. This is like, everybody can participate, and everybody should, quite honestly. It's just a matter of being able to have the confidence and get out there and take action and learn from it. And real estate is something that always has worked and will continue to work. So if you're listening to this and any of this is resonating with you, I urge you to take action.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So some of that action, it might be going to in-person meetups. I feel like that's a great way to network and talk to people, like you'd mentioned, talk to people and figure out what's working for them, what's not. Figure out how you can provide value to them. If you're just getting started and you don't know where to start, maybe find a mentor, find someone that, like I said, that you can provide value to, and people who are just getting started might be like, well, I don't have anything to offer, a big real estate investor. First off, we're not all big real estate investors. So I would encourage you not to be intimidated by real estate investors. I mean, some might be pretty off putting, but in my experience, almost everyone that I've met in this industry has always been very welcoming, very nice, and they understand that people have to start somewhere. And in my experience, it's just been a very open and caring community. So I encourage you guys to get started, get out there, start to meet people. Again, figure out how you can provide value. Maybe you drive around looking for distressed properties and shoot those addresses over to a real estate investor. They take them down and they might give you a little kickback. Or you can go to other real estate investors and be like, hey, do you need someone to manage a project? That's kind of how I got started. Is I went to a real estate investor and said, hey, can we JV on this? Can we do a joint venture agreement here? I'll bring in some cash, I'll manage the project, I'll get everything done, and at the end of the deal, we'll split the money. That's actually who I now work with on RealPropPro. He was my first joint venture partner. So I think that anytime that, you think that maybe you don't know enough, or, you don't think that you might be able to help people or other investors, I argue that you can. And I think it's important to learn as much about this industry, learn as much about the different strategies that are out there. We're going to talk a lot more with different investors in future episodes of what strategies you can implement. And, not all of these strategies require a ton of capital. So if you're sitting there with like not that much money, or, not that much experience, that's okay. Just taking action and learning is really the main thing. And like I said, the community is very open, very understanding to newer people. So, just start showing up, figure out where the meetups are, figure out where people are, doing business, and just show up.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I've been to a lot of these real estate meetups, and you'd be surprised. You show up to some of these, and without even knowing it, because some really high level real estate investors aren't flaunting their wealth, and you might see him and be like, why would this guy who's got $40,000, $50,000 a month in passive income coming in, like, can travel and, sit on a beach and doesn't have to work another day in his or her life? Like, why are they at this meetup? They're at the meetup because they love real estate. They love talking to real estate investors. They love being involved in deals. And like most any industry, the people that have found success really get a lot of joy out of helping others up, because at one time or another, they were the new person. They were somebody who was new to the space, and somebody else helped them out. And so I've had many conversations. I've learned so much. I was at a real estate event last month in Las Vegas, and I'm talking to a guy who's like at the top of the mountain, and, a 20-minute conversation where I got, in my mind, like thousands of dollars worth of education out of this person through a conversation, super humble, super willing to share, because that's what they love. And anybody who's been involved in real estate and seen the magic of it and created, wealth through real estate, I don't know. I personally feel like it's almost like you owe it to the real estate community to give back, because real estate's done so much for you. And so before I forget, man, I want to tell this story because I think it's motivational. It inspires me. It really like fires me up. I got into real estate investing in 2014. And like you, I'm popping into real estate meetups. I'm meeting fellow real estate investors. Some of these meetups have 100 people. Some of them have 7. Some of them are in the back of a Denny's. Like, you find these real estate meetups everywhere. And I I don't remember the exact location, but I remember it was one of many meetings I went to where like you're there and you're like, what am I doing here? Like, what is this place, right? Like I'm in an office that feels abandoned because it's 7:30 at night and everybody's gone home, and it's like, oh, we're all following each other down a hallway to meet in this conference room that's might be dusty and whatnot. And so
I was gonna ask if it was at a ballroom dancing place, because I know which meetup that is.
well, this was like across from Arden Fair Mall, like in 2014. And God, I think it was like Point West Drive, wherever it was. And I'm there, I meet somebody who's my age, and he has his real estate license. He's flipped a few homes, and we just hit it off. And so we start talking. We both like the Sacramento Kings. And, you know, I've shared this story. I think he shared it. I don't think he would care about me, you know, sharing his name. But Jazz Preet ends up becoming a great mortgage client of mine, because as we're talking, he's like, yeah, I do some flips, but some of the stuff I hold on to, I've got a partner. We're going to put 30-year, you know, conventional financing on it. My partner in Mountain View has great W-2 income. And so what I want people to get from this story, as Preet's going to these small little meetups, he's meeting other investors, he's taking action, and he's doing single family flips in Antelope and Rosemont. You know, for anybody unfamiliar with Sacramento, like stuff at that time in 14 was probably trading for high 200s, low 300s. And so nothing really special, nothing that like an investor who's starting would be like overwhelmed or think like this is beyond, you know, my scope or something that I could do. It's like buy a house and get it for $215, put $40,000 in rehab into it and sell it for $325, right? And make a spread. Well, to make a long story short, because sometimes I'm long-winded, me and Jazz Preet stay in touch. Me and Jazz Preet share some King season tickets. You know, 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 flips later, you know, holds one of the properties after flipping 5, then holds another one, and, you know, puts together what I think at its max was like 26 single family homes. I think they were all in 95826, like Rosemont or Antelope. And so 20 and 21, those houses are probably worth $500,000 each. They've got debt on them, just like we've talked about. The tenants are paying down the debt. The homes are appreciating over time. It's doing the magic that real estate does. And, you know, Jazz Preet's got a family. He's busy with life. I'm busy with life. You know, we're still in touch, but less of my services are needed. So, you know, I'm not financing these properties like I was before. And these aren't the exact numbers, so don't hold me to it, but roughly speaking, there's equity extracted. Some of these houses are sold. Some of them are refinanced and equity is taken out. He's got an opportunity, and through these real estate meetups and through talking to people, they're like, man, like if you do it right, hotels can be pretty profitable. And so a normal person like me or you or anybody else who's listening to this, who you know, starts with what I believe is kind of like the easy stuff, you know, a single family flip, puts, I think it was something like 1.8 million. And again, this isn't like we're saving $10 a month for 900 years. It's like this property went up 200,000 since I bought it. This property appreciated 250,000. Like it's all this magic of real estate appreciation that was able to afford a normal guy like me and you $1.8 million down to buy this $7 or $8 million apartment. Him and a partner, they've got somebody who is on site at this out-of-state hotel whose compensation is tied to how the property performs. So like, make sure the property performs well, that it's as, you know, fully occupied as possible. And I believe last time I spoke to him, that hotel was generating somewhere in the neighborhood of like $90,000 a month. Bottom line, like after expenses are paid, right? And so him and his partner, $45,000 a piece, and someone else is managing it. Someone else is getting paid six figures to make sure that it's managed and it's efficient and it's hitting, the KPIs of the business. He's not done, right? He's in contract on the second hotel. And I tell that story to say, like, that's me, that's you, that's anybody listening who's done that. And maybe that's not your path. Maybe you take, some of your real estate, fortune that you accumulate over the next decade or two, and you roll it into buying commercial property that, 7-Eleven rents space from, or whatever the case may be, right? But like, there's so many different ways to create insane wealth. And I think why that story really resonates with me and why I get really excited about it is because you might see a hotel owner, you might see somebody who owns a big commercial property, you might see these people who own things, and you think to yourself, like, man, that is somebody who's up here. That is somebody whose, dad owned a sports franchise or something. No, it's somebody who showed up to a 7-person meetup in a dingy back room across from Arden Fair Mall, and then took action, and then took action after that, and took action after that. And so, if that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what will. Like, everyday people creating generational wealth for themselves and their family through real estate. And that's one of 5,000 different ways it can be done. I know personally that, like, Jaspreet is a really great human being. And so, like, those stories and seeing him win really, really inspires me. And I've got dozens of others, who have done it multiple different ways. And over time, I'm like, oh, wow, I remember when I helped that guy buy his first duplex. And now he's got, X, Y, and Z, and he quit the job at Netflix and he's doing this. Or, wow, she was excited as a first-time home buyer to buy her first place in 2016. And now she's got 7 properties, single mom and has $14,000 a month that's relatively passive and, could stop now and be fine without working, but is going to keep going because she enjoys her job. And so, everyday people, man, and real estate is truly magic.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that story, because that was great. And I like how the story kind of highlights that, like, you can graduate, from one level to the next. You can start real simple, real basic, low money down, stuff like that. Hey, I'm going to wholesale. I'm going to find deals. And then after you're successful at that, you can step up, you can keep leveling up in real estate. And, you'd mentioned a 1031 exchange. For our listeners, that's just basically deferring tax. Instead of selling the property and having to pay taxes on that sale, you can exchange into another like-kind property, and that will, that'll defer your tax payments to a later date. So you can exchange from one property into, let's say, a bigger property that, maybe if you can also use a couple of different ones. You could have like 2 or 3 single family homes and 1031 exchange those into one larger, like, multifamily deal, for instance. And instead of paying taxes on the sale of those 3 single family homes, you've now deferred that tax liability into that new property. So just great stuff. Thank you so much for being a part of this first podcast, Matt. I appreciate it. You're such an amazing person. You have so much wisdom, and I'm just so grateful that you are our very first guest on the RPP podcast.
Oh, man, it was my pleasure. And I think too, like, nowadays, 2025 and beyond, people don't have any excuse. There's so much information out there, right? If you can't make it to an in-person real estate meetup, which I recommend, there's nothing better than in-person. There's endless content on YouTube. There's endless real estate investing, forums where you can glean this information from. And so, like, if you're an investor in the 1980s, you got to meet somebody at a coffee shop, or you're reading about it in a magazine or a newspaper or a book that somebody wrote. But nowadays, there's so much information out there that there's really no excuse. And so, you want to get out there and you want to learn, You want to get around other people that are doing stuff. And I think the getting around other people is part education and part learning and part reminding yourself that it's possible. I think that's like when I talk to new real estate investors, I need to remind them that. They need to remind themselves that, like, you know what, this is possible. Because I get so many calls, Ian. Interest rates are high. I don't know, I'm only a single income and I make this. And like day in and day out, I'm like, listen, if you bought a duplex, we could use the rental income from the other unit to offset your payment as far as qualifying goes. So I could qualify for something that's $550. Yeah. Here's what the payment would look like. I know rents would be about this. You get that from the other side. Well, that's kind of neat. I didn't think I could, and that is like step number one, is the belief that it's possible. And then you go out and execute on it.
Absolutely. And think of like a fourplex, right? Like how much could a normal person or a couple qualify for on a fourplex? I mean, you're talking $1 million loan, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing too, is, you make your income and then the lender knows that, if you're going to own or occupy this fourplex, the other 3 units are going to be occupied by somebody, they're going to be tenants that are paying you rent, and so you get to take those market rents, it's a 75% multiple of it that you can use for income. But, without getting too far in the weeds of the mortgage stuff, the other piece of advice for new investors is talk to somebody. The process of getting pre-approved and knowing your numbers, what you qualify for, what it might look like, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything, right? Like that's an educational course that I know is free. And, we operate in 48 states. This isn't a plug for me or my business. Like somebody who you like and trust, who's going to be able to, intake your application, your documents. In most cases, just do a soft credit pull. You don't have to do a hard credit pull. And then they go, all right, Sally, based on everything we've got, if you bought a single family house, with the 5% down that you have, you'd qualify for up to about $400,000, right? And here's what the mortgage payment looks like on a $400,000 purchase. If you bought a duplex, here's what you'd qualify for. And, you could buy that duplex either 3.5% down FHA or 5% down conventional. You're going to own or occupy and live on one side and rent out the other. Those are the conversations and those are the things that all real estate investors start somewhere. And so, you talk to somebody and you're getting yourself pre-approved. Mortgage broker like myself, like we know what, that person wants to know, needs to know, should know. And so you're going to get those lessons along the way. And then it's just magic what, that first action can do. Because I think it's not like you all of a sudden have all the knowledge in the world and you're a real estate expert. I think more than anything, like the light bulb goes off and you go, it's possible. And if there's one piece of advice that I could give to real estate investors, it's like, take that first step. Take that first action and you'll surprise yourself. You'll surprise yourself with like all of a sudden the light's on in the room and anything's possible. If you don't ever take that first step, all of it feels foreign. All of it feels like, it's something that is just a dream. But you take the first step, you go, man, I bought a duplex. I didn't think that was possible. What should I do next? Should I buy a single family? Should I go out there and buy another duplex? I'm speaking this through experience because I've seen it just happen hundreds of times. And so if you're listening, let this be inspiration to you. Let your story be the next story that's told.
That sounds great. Where can people connect with you and learn more about what you do?
If people go to YouTube, Matt the Mortgage Guy, I've got over 1,500 videos. My whole goal there is empower people through education. Matt the Mortgage Guy UM on Instagram. If you go to mtmg.com, I paid big money for that domain so people didn't have to type in mattthemortgageguy.com, right? Just mtmg.com. And I promise you, if you're searching Matt the Mortgage Guy, you're searching Matt Gougé Mortgage Broker, you're going to find a way to get in touch with me. I'm not hard to find, and that's done on purpose because I like helping people out. I like serving people. And so if we can help in any way, I'm more than happy to. If it's not me, I still think that it's vitally important that no matter where you're listening or where you're at in your journey, you start talking to people that can help you with the mortgage side. And the numbers matter. And I don't want people to get stuck and not take action just because they don't know. Because you don't get fined, you don't get thrown in jail. Like if you don't qualify, you don't qualify. Then you're on a plan and you're on a path to figure out, what it might look like in 6 months or 12 months. But like you have to start somewhere. You have to know those numbers. What happens more often than not, Ian, is somebody calls me, man, my landlord is selling. It sucks. I'm going to have to go rent. 20 minutes later, that same person on the phone was like, Matt, thank you so much. Like, I didn't think that I could even qualify to buy this house. Well, you don't know what you don't know, right? If you don't have the conversation, you're never going to know. And so find out whether it's, buying that single family you're renting, whether it's, buying a duplex, and, that's the base of it. And not enough people start with that. Real estate's really cool to look at. It's really cool to pop into open houses. It's really cool to go to real estate investor meetups and talk about all the different types of real estate investing. For your personal investing, you might talk to a hard money lender and hey, I was thinking about a flip. How does that work? You might talk to, a residential mortgage broker like myself and say, I've got eligibility as a veteran. Like, how does the VA loan work? Would I qualify for that? Ask those questions. There's plenty of people out there that are willing and able to give you the answers. And, real estate investors, very, very successful ones are born every day. So, you got to start and, surprise yourself with what you can do.
Yeah. Thanks again so much, Matt. Before we go, I want to leave the listeners with this. One of the biggest things that separates successful real estate investors from those who never get started is taking action despite uncertainty. Every single investor, including Matt, myself, and everyone you'll hear on this podcast, started with zero experience. They didn't have all of the answers. They didn't have, or in some cases, they didn't have a ton of money to get started, and they all made mistakes. But the key is that they didn't let fear stop them from getting started. So if you're sitting there thinking, I want to invest in real estate, but I don't know where to start, or well, I want to get started in real estate, but what if I fail? Just know that the only way to guarantee failure is to never start at all. Your first deal may not be perfect. Your financing may be difficult. But if you take the next big step forward, you'll be miles ahead of everyone else who is still waiting for the perfect time to get started. Take what you learned today and do something with it, whether it's making calls to motivated sellers, running numbers on rehab projects, or just getting educated. Whatever it is, take action. That's how you win in real estate, and that's how you win in life. Thank you so much for tuning in to the first RPP podcast, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, man. That was fun, dude.
Thanks.